events. And I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the big stories that we need to be looking at in depth. Nothing is off the table and no one's going to be silenced for saying what they think. Keeping me company today is writer and broadcaster Charlie Peters, and here's what's coming up on the show. The PM is in Belfast for emergency talks on the ongoing crisis in Northern Ireland. But is he about to tear up the Brexit agreement and start a trade war with the EU? Meanwhile, Boris Johnson's been accused of playing politics with children's health after delaying a ban on buy one, get one free deals on junk food. Plus, GB News has learned that more than 2,000 migrants are waiting in French ports to cross the Channel to Britain on small boats. All that and, of course, the Alex Agenda. And remember, you can email the show on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. First, though, it's time for the GB News headlines. Good afternoon, it's just 1 minute past 2. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister's spokesman says the government believes it can make significant changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol within the original framework. Boris Johnson's in Belfast to hold emergency talks with Northern Ireland's leaders in a bid to break the Stormont deadlock. He's threatened to override parts of the protocol, despite EU warnings it would breach international law. The Assembly's been plunged into crisis in the wake of local elections, with the DUP refusing to join a devolved government. We'll keep you up to date today. Now, the energy price cap could be reviewed every 3 months under new plans by the energy regulator, instead of every 6 months as it is currently. Well, the idea is that measures would pass on a potential fall or rise in gas prices to households more quickly. The cap's currently at a record high of nearly £2,000 per year for the average household. It's reviewed every October and April. The Russian president says that expansion of military infrastructure on Sweden or Finland's territory would demand a reaction from Moscow. Speaking at a Russian-led collective security treaty organisation, Putin today said that NATO's expansion was a problem for Russia. Sweden's expected to make a formal bid to join the military alliance today. Finland confirmed yesterday it would be applying for membership. McDonald's says it started a process to sell its business in Russia. The fast food giant closed all its restaurants operating in the country in March, having operated there for 30 years. McDonald's says the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine has meant it's no longer tenable to continue business in Russia. GB News has been told that more than 2,000 people are waiting in areas around the French ports of Calais and Dunkirk to try to make it across the Channel. Our Home and Security editor Mark White has been investigating.
This morning, despite gusts of more than 30 miles an hour in the Channel, people smugglers were still shoving small migrant boats into the water. This Border Force rib delivering some of those pulled from a small boat just after 6 a.m. Over the weekend, at least 600 crossed the Channel, but poor conditions led to several rescues of boats in trouble on the French side of the water. There are, we're told, more than 2,000 people waiting in areas around Calais and Dunkirk for the chance to make the crossing. Sources say more are being driven in from cities, including Lille, on a daily basis. Despite confirmation from the Prime Minister over the weekend that the first 50 would-be asylum seekers have been notified they'll be flown to Rwanda within a fortnight, there appears, for now at least, to be no reduction in the numbers determined to cross. Mark White, GB News.
The London mayor says he feels incredibly safe after reportedly being named on a kill list by a US shooting suspect. Sadiq Khan was listed in a 180-page manifesto called Kill High-Profile Enemies that had been published online by Payton Gendron. Gendron's accused of shooting dead 10 people at a supermarket in the US city of Buffalo on Saturday. The London mayor says the best response to terror threats is resilience.
To recognise that one of the things these terrorists want us to do is to change the way we lead our lives. They want us to not come forward if you're a minority, if you're a woman. They want us to cower and be scared. We can't allow them to succeed. And make sure we're always vigilant, never complacent. The best response to terrorists is to make sure we're resilient and we don't allow ourselves to be cowards.
As school students across the country start their end-of-year exams today, head teachers have been raising concerns about a lack of invigilators. The Association of School and College Leaders found a third of schools hadn't been able to recruit enough people to supervise GCSEs and A-levels over the summer. They said increased anxiety in pupils who've then requested to sit exams in separate rooms, plus invigilators' concerns about catching coronavirus, were some of the reasons behind the shortages. The Queen has received a standing ovation on the last day of the Royal Windsor Horse Show. She was there last night for a star-studded celebration of her Platinum Jubilee in the grounds of Windsor Castle. She made a couple of visits to the horse show last week, her first public appearances since March, having missed the state opening of Parliament due to mobility issues. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
If you want to know how dreadful the EU can be, look no further than the bullying over the Northern Ireland Protocol. For a border that was the subject of a bloody conflict, Brussels is politicking at whatever the cost, just to prove a bitter point on Brexit. The nasty EU is hell-bent on seeing the UK suffer. Bring your pet back to Belfast from Blighty and it risks being slaughtered if you don't have the right EU papers. A shop in Belfast selling pasties from England that have been on shelves forever, well, no longer unless Brussels says so. Heaven forfend the offending item crosses the border and somehow destroys the safety and security of a continent. This isn't common sense. This is spite. When the UK proposes simple fixes, like allowing stuff, parts of trade between Britain and Northern Ireland for eons that stand zero chance of being sold on, to be free from checks, it's a no-brainer. But for Brussels, it's just no. They're relishing inflicting £2.5 million of daily hurt on Belfast just because they can. For crying out loud, 20% of all EU border checks are now going on stuff going from one side of the UK to the other. Now, Northern Ireland doesn't even have a government because of the protocol. The UK has every right to tell Brussels to do one. But if we do, they're threatening a trade war. But because we won't reciprocate, it will only mean higher prices on their side during a continental cost of living crisis. And yet, the exact same bloc is still buying oil from Putin. Our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, is at Hillsborough Castle in Northern Ireland for us. Doogie, what's the latest? I understand the Prime Minister is there. Well, Doogie looks like he's frozen in time at present, so we will jog on to our next guest on the subject before trying to catch up with him. So let's talk now to former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. Ben, what are your thoughts on the situation? You've been an agitator indeed on the protocol, taking the government to court over this. What do you think needs to happen now?
Well, the Prime Minister needs to do what Suella Braverman indicated he might last week and actually confirmed he had the right to do, which is to take unilateral action and suspend part or all of the protocol or ditch it. You know, he's got to start acting as if he has taken back control from Brussels and exercise that control in the interest of British people.
For instance, we're dealing with a situation where there is no power-sharing executive in Northern Ireland following the elections because the DUP refused to take seats until the protocol is scrapped. But Sinn Féin are warning that this is going to lead to uncertainty and tension. The EU, meanwhile, are saying, well, do that and there'll be a trade war. It's breaking an international agreement.
Well, it isn't breaking an international agreement. There are international provisions which prevent countries from entering into treaties where they know by doing so they actually offend the other country's domestic constitutional laws. And we now have two judgments from British courts that confirm that the Act of Union has been either broken or subjugated. The courts couldn't agree between themselves what the exact wording should be. But either way, the Act of Union that actually created the United Kingdom has been broken by the protocol. If that isn't reason enough for the Prime Minister to take action, and justifiably so, legitimately so, and remember, Suella Braverman has said grounds exist to take action, I don't know what is. At what point does the Conservative and Unionist Prime Minister actually do his job?
So, Suella Braverman, of course, is the Attorney-General who gives the government legal advice, and you're saying essentially that Article 16, which is the trigger that would allow one side to unilaterally exit the protocol if there was a threat to...
Suspend, yeah.
To suspend, if there was a threat to economic well-being, security and so forth. Now, Boris Johnson simply said the protocol is out of date, that due to COVID and cost of living, that he wants to amend it. Why do you think the EU are digging their heels in and are not listening to him?
Well, the EU, as you started off by saying, want to punish the United Kingdom. When we were both MEPs together, you'll remember the line in Brussels was the price of Brexit will be Northern Ireland. And they're not interested in something that works. They want something that maximally damages the United Kingdom. And what could damage the United Kingdom more than actually breaking the union of Northern Ireland and Great Britain so that the UK no longer exists, so that the Saltire of St. Patrick exits the Union Jack, so the flag under which we all grew up and generations before us did no longer exists. That's what the EU wants. It wants to send a very powerful message out there to all potentially errant member states not to follow the United Kingdom's example. They are a bully. The EU is a bully, and we need to stand up to them.
I mean, if it is so injurious, if we would be morally righteous in bidding it for all the reasons that you've just laid out, why is it the government are dragging their heels? Are they really scared of a possibility of seriously frustrating trade between the EU and the UK for the rest of the UK, not just Northern Ireland?
Well, we've got to go back to basics. At a very basic level, the trade relationship between the European Union and the United Kingdom is one that hugely favours the EU, not Great Britain, not the United Kingdom. We run a deficit of about 100 billion euros a year. So if they really want a trade war, it'll be on their heads. It'll be the German people who suffer. As long as we prepare properly for a trade war, and that would mean genuinely binning all those regulations that we've adopted over 40 years from Brussels, cutting taxes, being the kind of Conservative government that Boris Johnson promised he would be, if he does that, we would win a trade war, hands down. But the question is this, Alex. There's no way the EU is going to mount a trade war with the economic problems that it's already facing, with the cost of living crisis as a result of fuel prices going up. Everyone, by the way, I want to debunk one thing. Everyone blames the cost of living crisis on the Ukrainian war. That's not what caused this. What caused this was lockdowns, supply reserves dropping dramatically, fossil fuel reserves dropping dramatically during lockdown, and then a rapid opening up of the economies. We had a cost of living crisis before the Ukraine war. Leave that aside for a moment. There is no way the EU is going to risk a trade war at the moment. And this is the time we should be either invoking Article 16 or ideally getting rid of the protocol altogether.
Ben Habib, thank you so much for coming on the programme today. That's Ben Habib, who I sat with in the European Parliament and has taken the government to court a number of times over the Northern Ireland Protocol. We can now join our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, who is at Hillsborough Castle. Dougie, what is the latest?
Well, you join me at the Queen's residence in Northern Ireland. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, swept in here about 20 minutes ago. Just in the last few moments, Michelle O'Neill from Sinn Féin and that delegation has went in now. They are about to start talks with the PM over how to get the Northern Ireland Assembly back up and running. Now, it shouldn't be down. It is down because of the protocol. It's down because unionists will refuse to go back into a government that they cannot control the laws in. Of course, the laws here are now overlooked by the European Courts of Justice. They will say where and when Northern Ireland can trade, and that is a problem for anybody that wants to govern here. Unionist politicians are saying that the protocol has turned it into a colony. Now, the protocol is an international trade agreement, and it overwrites that of an international peace agreement, the Good Friday Agreement, and it replaces Article 6, the Act of the Union. So Boris has got a bit of a job in his hands because, if anything, it was his deal, the protocol, that actually stopped the Good Friday Agreement. The DUP are due in here round about an hour's time, and we'll see what they have to say when they come out. But I do believe that they will want to see action first from the EU, from Boris Johnson, before they make any move. Their credibility is on the line, and the credibility of Boris Johnson's government, as far as they're concerned, is also on the line.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is Boris is over there to bang heads together in order to get a power-sharing executive set up, rather than mean the people of Northern Ireland are held to ransom in some way over the Northern Ireland Protocol. And I understand as well that there should be a key bit of legislation going through the UK Parliament tomorrow, potentially to pave the way to change the Northern Ireland Protocol. Do you think Boris Johnson's going to be successful on either front?
Well, no, they won't move, because he said he came to the DUP conference when he was running for leader. He visited Stormont. He courted the DUP. He told them what he wouldn't do. There would never be a border in the Irish Sea. And then, of course, Gove did the same. Frost did the same. And then Liz Truss was here, and she did the same. The DUP are not going to move. They say that their credibility as a party to be fooled will be on the line if that happens. So no matter what he puts through, it could take 9 months for that legislation to get through. I think probably what we will see is Article 16 being triggered, then the unionist parties going in, and piece by piece, as each piece of legislation goes ahead, I think then the Northern Ireland government will get up and running. Most people are saying not for months. I don't think it'll be as long as that, but I do think it'll be Article 16 that'll be triggered. And don't forget, Article 16 doesn't make the protocol go away. It just brings everything back to normal. We've only seen 30% of the protocol enforced in Northern Ireland. There's still another 70%. It is making goods on our shelves less because there's too much paperwork to get goods in and out. So therefore it's driving the cost up because of selection. It's also putting 20% on the costs of transportation into Northern Ireland. So I think when that starts to bite, and bite hard, there will be a massive sea change away from that, especially with the cost of living that's coming in. I think Boris will have to do something to assure unionists that this is going to happen.
Dougie Beattie, thank you ever so much. Our GB News Northern Ireland reporter. Well, I have writer and broadcaster Charlie Peters joining me for the show. Charlie, the leader of the DUP, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, has said he needs to see action, not words, from Boris Johnson. But it seems to me that this is more words from the Prime Minister, and a government still very tentative about getting rid of the Northern Ireland Protocol. What next?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Boris Johnson is doing a lot of talking at the moment, but in this market, talk is very cheap. Action is long overdue. And we've inherited this problem after Theresa May's useless ministry, and part of her team, Gavin Barwell, they still argue in favour of the protocol and the situation they set up. But it is, of course, something entirely in the EU's favour, and action is long overdue. Just think about when we were going through the whole negotiation process with the EU, all the conversation was that if we don't do certain things to benefit the EU, there will be a ginormous rise in Republican terrorism. That if we don't do the right thing, the Good Friday Agreement will be overridden and there'll be a disaster. Now that there are threats of unionist violence over this situation, the same urgency to act in our favour of the union is not being heard. It's all the usual suspects, really, isn't it? FBP, Twitter people and wet Tories in favour of this protocol, which allows the United Kingdom to split apart. We need to reject it, at least trigger Article 16, better yet, suspend the whole protocol and ensure that Ulster is a firm and full member of the United Kingdom.
We just saw there Boris Johnson, fresh pictures of the Prime Minister arriving in Northern Ireland for those discussions. Charlie, why do you think it is that for people like me sitting and looking at this, and as someone who's in the Brexit party, I could see from a long way off that rather than the Northern Ireland Protocol suddenly becoming out of date, the oven-ready deal was always out of date. But you can see the circumstances in which it happened, with all the politicking that went on 4 years after the referendum and the fear that Brexit could be lost entirely. But why is it that the rest of the world can't seem to see quite how cynical and dangerous this game that the EU are playing is?
Well, I think most people around the world outside of Great Britain have a misunderstanding of kind of the nefariousness with which the EU acts. There's a long checkered history of Brussels overriding the decisions of a population if they feel they are incorrect, and acting viscerally in its best interests against those of Europeans, even if they are British. So I think we should perhaps educate the rest of the world on what's going on here. But unfortunately, I think the comms coming out of the government aren't sufficiently aggressive about the state of the EU's approach. We need to try and sell to the rest of the world, and indeed some Britons, why this is happening. That it's, the bucklands of Brussels.
Charlie, thank you. You're with GB News on TV and radio. Coming up, anger after a ban on buy one, get one free is binned. Good for our wallets, perhaps, but what about our waistlines? Plus, as Sweden says it will apply for NATO membership, what will Putin's next move be? Time for a short break now and a check on the weather forecast.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. Plenty going on this week. Some very warm sunshine at times, but also the likelihood of further thunderstorms. We've had some overnights. We've got some more again this afternoon. Low pressure is dominating out to the west, drawing up the warm and at times quite humid air. And we are seeing some thunderstorms along this weather front, pushing their way steadily northwards. Met Office yellow warning in place. Torrential rain is possible, parts of northern England, Northern Ireland especially, before they tend to fizzle out through the evening. Rain may persist across the far north of Scotland, but for most it turns into a dry night, clear spells, a little bit misty in places, and temperatures mostly holding up in double figures. On to Tuesday, and for some a very warm day. A fine, bright day for much of the Midlands, northern and eastern England, a good part of Scotland as well. But the east coast of Scotland could stay a little misty and murky. And further west, we have cloud increasing, some rain at times for Northern Ireland, pushing into western Scotland and western parts of Wales, the far southwest of England, also likely to see a bit of rain during Tuesday. And with the cloud and rain, temperatures suppressed, but in the sunshine further east, 25, 26, maybe 27 degrees Celsius in one or two locations, so really quite warm and humid. Then that rain turns a little more persistent, edging in across more of northern England and Scotland, with the risk of further thunderstorms then on Tuesday evening across East Anglia and the southeast. Again, tending to clear away overnight, leading to a largely fine day on a Wednesday. There will be some showers across western parts of Scotland. Again, some coasts may stay a bit misty, and where the breeze is coming in from the sea, it will stay on the cool sides, but although perhaps not quite as warm as Tuesday, we're still looking at temperatures getting over 20 degrees Celsius in places on Wednesday afternoon, before, again, the risk of thunderstorms coming up from France as we go through Wednesday night. Plenty going on.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, back in the day, cigarette companies claimed smoking fags could cure asthma and dentists recommended them. Even without the stuff we know today, that's a pretty audacious claim. Just a packet of cigs leaves most of us with a hacking cough and a mouth as fresh as a bonfire in a dumpster. It's crazy they got away with it. Well, we now know the government's promise to crack down on the food industry's questionable marketing seems to have bogged off, like buy one, get one free. Don't fool yourselves. Big Food aren't Mother Teresa. They want you to fill your guts with cheap junk so they cash in. It's hardly the same as smoking, is it, that kills? It's the nanny state on steroids, I hear you cry. Well, if nanny is there to stop over 30,000 deaths a year, far more than smoking, and tackle the country's biggest health issue, with 2/3 of people wobbling their way to an early grave, then nanny should probably roll her sleeves up. Well, let's go back to my guest for the show, writer and broadcaster Charlie Peters. Now, Charlie, I have a feeling we don't see eye to eye on this one, do we?
Not precisely, no. I have to say, I think that most attempts to intervene in the dietary choices and lifestyle choices of people in Britain don't tend to work in the way that they're expected. And they're usually based on, I think, fake or at least overhyped perceptions of the health of your average Briton. Now, for example, child obesity. We hear stats every year flapping about how fat our kids are, or at least how overweight they are, with many schools even sending their parents of children letters saying that your slim child is overweight. Lots of parents take to the media to say, my child is perfectly healthy, what do you on about? And this is part of a wider, I think, moral panic we have about eating in this country, that people are, I don't know, there's often a kind of a classist element that we can't trust people to feed themselves appropriately. I think to have that kind of messaging amid a cost of living crisis when food prices are going up is not the kind of thing I want to see. And I think that's obviously why this bog-off deal has been moved away.
Now, you say this sort of a classist issue, but is it not the case, actually, that the poorest in society is sort of, left to have to eat your oven chips and things like that with crap calories and no nutritional value? And the point is that, you don't have to do big health surveys to look around you and see that we are getting fatter. Obesity is a massive problem.
I don't think we are. I think childhood obesity is a myth. I think, generally speaking, the rates have remained the same for the best part of 30 years. When it comes to poorer people, as you say, spending too much money on oven chips, etc., well, it's often cheaper to cook naturally. Making your own lasagna will cost significantly less than buying a shop-bought ready meal, high-fat, high-salt, awful mess. So perhaps there is a route into education here rather than punishment, which I don't think ever serves the purposes of the people it's meant to.
It's interesting you say that, you don't think obesity has changed in 30 years. Perhaps it hasn't, but surely that's only winding the clock back to the 90s, when a lot of the junk food we're discussing was in circulation, and not winding it as far back, before big food entered into the food industry, as it does now, with this proliferation of everything ready-made, ultra-processed stuff with a load of E-numbers and salts and sugars. And the nation's health is without a doubt suffering. You just have to look at deaths from COVID, largely tied to people with metabolic syndrome. Do you think that the government should try and regulate the food industry and say, if you're going to sell things to the public, in much the same way as we've now got big ugly signs on cigarette packets saying this stuff could kill you, you that if you buy something, packed full of sugar, as many low-fat goods or things marketed as low-fat often are, that it should come with significant health warnings rather than that poxy pie chart in the corner.
Well, I'm afraid I also disagree with plain packaging on cigarettes and warnings on. I don't believe these things are particularly helpful. I think being nannied in such a way is counterintuitive, and often people will learn through their own experience and their own understanding of the health situation to choose for themselves. Now, sure, I said going back to the 90s, and as you rightly know, there was an explosion in the availability of food. But I'd rather live in the land of plenty, where food is available for all people and people don't go hungry, than, say, the 1970s, when perhaps our BMI rates were lower, but also people were struggling to feed and families were struggling. This is not a preferable situation, even if it means that a once-in-a-century pandemic causes so much crisis.
And is it not the case, though, that perhaps kids should be taught how to cook at school again, properly and healthily? I
firmly agree with that. I think education in terms of good cooking is a routine, and I am always aghast when I meet people, even very well educated people, who can't cook a meal.
Oh, I'm looking forward to my dinner invite at your place then. Cheers, Charlie. You're with GB News on TV and DAB Radio. Coming up, more than 2,000 migrants waiting in Calais and Dunkirk to try to make it across the Channel in small boats. We're going to be getting the latest on that. Now, though, it's time for a check on the news headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's 2:30. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, in the last few minutes, the Swedish government has announced they've decided to apply for NATO membership. Finland made a similar announcement yesterday as both countries reevaluate their security status as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. President Vladimir Putin said today that growth of NATO's membership was a problem for Russia and that expansion of military infrastructure on the territory of either Nordic country would demand a reaction from Moscow. The Prime Minister's spokesman says the government believes it can make significant changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol within the original protocol framework. Boris Johnson is in Belfast to hold emergency talks with Northern Ireland's leaders today in a bid to break the Stormont deadlock. McDonald's says it started a process to sell its business in Russia. The fast food giant closed all its restaurants in the country in March, having operated in Russia for 30 years. McDonald's says the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine has meant it's no longer tenable to continue to operate business in Russia. The London mayor says he feels incredibly safe after reportedly being named on a kill list by a US shooting suspect. Sadiq Khan was listed in a 180-page manifesto called Kill High-Profile Enemies that had been published online by Payton Gendron. Gendron's accused of shooting dead 10 people at a supermarket in the US city of Buffalo on Saturday. The London mayor says the best response to terror threats is resilience. The Queen received a standing ovation on the last day of the Royal Windsor Horse Show. She was there for a star-studded celebration of her Platinum Jubilee in the grounds of Windsor Castle. It's her first public outing since March, having missed the state opening of Parliament due to mobility issues. You're up to date. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Don't go anywhere. Alex will be back shortly with We Need to Talk About.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 1962. The pounding of the planet's heart is palpable as the end of the world is a push of a button away. As America puts nukes in Italy and Turkey, the Soviet Union line up theirs in Cuba. World War III hangs over the West like the shadow of death. Wind the clock forward 60 years and every attempt by Russia to recreate that existential dread just isn't working. As Sweden joins Finland in showing clear intention of joining NATO within a matter of weeks, the Kremlin has warned it will not be tolerated, saying the grave mistake will have far-reaching consequences, with plans to deploy nuclear warheads along the border. But despite the constant flow of rabid threats from raging Russia, Western resolve seems only to be strengthened. But are we dicing with death? Surely the fact that the UK has signed a defence pact with Finland and Sweden, protecting them in the volatile weeks before they join NATO, must be a calculated decision. And one that means we can sneak our subs into Scandinavian waters, a whisker away from the man threatening to destroy the world. Well, I'm joined now by Bjorn Fagerström, Senior Research Fellow and Director of the Europe Programme at the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. Bjorn, who better to talk to? And very recent news, actually, that the Prime Minister, Magdalena Andersson, has just announced the intention of Sweden joining NATO, ending 200 years of military non-alignment. What's your take on this? Is this a sensible move?
Well, it's clearly a big shift. As you say, we've been non-aligned since the Napoleonic Wars. So this is a big step, but it's already in, since February, the same Prime Minister said that we would continue to be military non-aligned. But clearly, Putin's war has changed that. And also the fact that Finland is opting for NATO membership, which was especially communicated today by the Swedish PM, that makes all the difference for Sweden.
I mean, Putin has said that Finland, Sweden have never been under threat, or certainly not recently, by Russia, and that actually applying to join NATO he regards as an act of aggression, putting hostile resources, armaments, potentially troops along the borders of Russia. Has this decision, do you think, been driven by public opinion when, in fact, considering there is a bit of a nut job in charge of Russia at the moment, it might not be a good time to aggravate Russia?
True, but I think most Swedes, clearly, since there is a majority now in favor of this, sees more risks of being outside of NATO than joining NATO. But clearly, this is not in the interests of Vladimir Putin, and we can expect, and there was also a theme in the Prime Minister's speech, that we should expect and be cautious regarding cyber operations, hybrid attempts to disturb this process, for example. On the other hand, Vladimir Putin seems to be pretty occupied elsewhere, so from that sense, it might not be such a bad time to join after all.
How important has the UK's defence pact with Sweden and Finland been, that was signed about a week ago, in paving the way to the membership of NATO, giving you, let's say, some degree of added protection in these coming weeks while accession to NATO is being discussed?
Well, this has been very important, how to manage this kind of interim phase between an application and a full membership. And that's a process that could take months, of course, before the ratification is done. So it has been really paramount for Sweden and Finland to see what kind of security, if not guarantees, then at least assurances we can receive. Both Sweden and Finland has been in the US, talking to Germany, and now, especially last week, we saw Boris Johnson visiting both Sweden and Finland and signing this declaration, which to some extent mirrors the relation we had while the UK were a member of the European Union. So now we reinstated that kind of solidarity between us, but also added aspects such as training and possible troop deployments in our area. And that is important for the public and for the politicians of Sweden to feel that kind of support during this phase.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, actually, whether you think this is going to initially be a sort of tentative membership where you join NATO but don't do things like have joint exercises or allow arms to be built up in your countries, and NATO shared resources. But do you think, actually, that this is likely to go the other direction in a show of strength against Putin?
Well, I think the Social Democrats in their decision made clear that they would like to have the same policy that, for example, Norway has, that we won't have any nuclear weapons or foreign bases on Swedish territory in peacetime. And actually, the opposition in today's debate came out in favor of that policy as well. So I think that would most likely be the Swedish policy, and it's already existent among the Nordic countries. But apart from that, I think we'll join as fully fledged members, and also have quite a lot to add to NATO's defense in the Nordic regions. When talking about the submarine airplanes, both Sweden and Finland, quite credible military actors in some specific fields.
Bjorn, it's been fantastic to have you on the programme today. Bjorn Fagerston there, who's Director of the Europe Programme, Swedish Institute of International Affairs. Well, Charlie Peters is still with me. Charlie, are you applauding this? Are you happy about Finland and Sweden joining? Are you in the camp that some people are saying, well, this is all very well, you can understand what the appeal is, but considering that Putin is hardly the most stable character currently in charge of Russia, really is this the time to be doing this?
No, if not now, when? I think that's the best answer to that criticism at the moment. I think for a long time, and I myself was guilty of it at the start of the war, people were very nervous about pushing too far and inspiring a crazed reaction from Putin. A guy who invades a country in such a way is clearly on the edge somewhat. But I think we have been a little bit too cautious and too overwhelmed by our fear of nuclear Armageddon, which I think is highly, highly unlikely, below 1%. And there are certain actions we can take that don't raise that risk, but absolutely support the defence of Europe. And this is one of them. As your guest just said, these two militaries are credible military actors. Finland has a policy of total defence. All of its people are raised in a mentality of defending the nation and go through military service. Sweden, since 1946, has created one of the best anti-tank weapons in the world, the Carl Gustaf rifle. The second destruction of a T-90 in the Ukraine war was carried out by one of these weapons, donated by Canada. Now, with a link with Sweden, they can give even more. So this is a humongous win, I think, for Europe.
And just quickly, you have both Swedish and military roots, am I right?
That's correct. I was born in Sweden, and I'm a British Army reservist. Hey, it's a double win for me.
Charlie, thank you. Now, GBNews has been told that more than 2,000 people are waiting in areas around the French ports of Calais and Dunkirk to try to make it across the Channel in small boats. More are being driven to the area daily from cities including Lille. Over the weekend, up to 600 people crossed despite the poor weather conditions that led to a string of rescue operations on the French side of the Channel. Well, let's get an update now from our Home and Security editor, Mark White. Mark, I mean, it's figures that certainly don't surprise me, and the weather's only set to improve, isn't it? So the Rwanda plan doesn't seem to be deterring people.
No, certainly the progression, as we'd expect, of the weather is for gradual improvement. Today, I should say, though, that the weather forecast is blowing about 30-mile-an-hour gusts in the Channel, so not at all ideal. Despite that, though, there was a small boat that made it across. 6 a.m. this morning that it was spotted and then intercepted, and those on board, taken on board Border Force cutter and landed, as you can see from these pictures, at Dover around about 8 this morning. 20 people on board that one small boat that somehow managed to make it across. in less than ideal conditions. And at the weekend as well, more than 600 crossed the channel, and the weather conditions weren't brilliant, particularly on Sunday, with squally showers, thunder showers in the channel as well. But a significant number made it across. And I've been speaking to a source of ours in the area who tells us that there are, at the moment, at least 2,000 people in and around Calais and Dunkirk who are waiting to get on small boats to come across. And every day that number is being added to, with more people, he says, being bussed in from cities away from the coast, including the likes of Lille. Now, as I say, the weather at the moment is not great, but it is due to start improving. And it's clear that for the moment, at least, there is no real deterrent effect of the Rwandan policy. But to be fair, of course, to the government, that policy hasn't actually started, in the sense that we haven't yet sent anyone to Rwanda, although the Prime Minister did say over the weekend that the first 50 would-be asylum seekers have been notified that they are due to be sent to Rwanda in the coming weeks. Now, it is the intention to send them in the next fortnight, but I think the government is fully prepared for a raft of legal challenges from asylum seekers, from those human rights groups and from charities as well in the weeks ahead.
Mark, thank you ever so much. Mark White there, our GB News Home and Security Editor. Charlie, obviously the French are tripping up over themselves to help us out with this one, aren't they?
Absolutely, can't get enough of this.
I mean, it's an ongoing disaster, and it's almost like we've run out of road with how to deal with this. The Rwanda plan, well, let's see if it does take off, literally, in the form of planes with migrants on there, going to deportation centres in Rwanda. But, what is the solution to this? Well, as you rightly note, we haven't started to actually adopt the deterrence policy that is being mooted. So I think that'll make some change. But I think there needs to be a broader conversation about how this country deals with immigration and how specifically this government has failed consistently on every point. Legal immigration, for example, is closing in on 1 million a year. Is this the kind of Brexit government that wanted to deliver to the wishes and whims of the people? Clearly not. So if you're not able to deal with limiting immigration in a legal sense, then you're probably not even going to bother when it comes to illegal immigration, because what does an extra kind of 50,000 people coming over the channel really mean in the end when you have nearly 1 million coming in through legal routes? So I think the introduction of this deterrence effect will make a difference, some difference at least. But also, there clearly needs to be some sort of deep state undercover work we do over the border, where we smash these gangs or pay them off or do something to stop this from happening. Learn from our Australian cousins, who massively reduced the number of boats coming over, I think in part because they paid off dealers. Right. I did not know that, Charlie. Thank you. Interesting stuff. I think it is actually a lot of Albanian criminal networks, isn't it, exploiting these routes? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I have every need to vent today. Having been promised an idyllic future, travelling the world to Gardens of Eden, to wander in paradise, blue skies and sparkling seas, with a refreshing glass of something strong at the end. I spent yesterday evening huddled over in the drizzle, getting backache and RSI from hacking chunks out of AstroSturf with a stick, in the vain attempts to hit a little white ball, while Mr. Alex kept on shouting to me about reference points and torso torsion. Golf, ladies and gentlemen, invented in Scotland by people who put salt in their porridge. It must be time for some collective therapy. Well, first came that outcry over a Tory MP saying people should learn a spot of home economics and be taught how to feed themselves cheaply. And now the PC babies are wailing at a government minister suggesting people work longer hours to make more cash during the cost of living crisis. Oh, it's a sad reflection of a coddled country who expect government to run to their aid every time a crisis hits. It's not fair, they cry at the suggestion they could show a bit of common sense at how to manage money as a war in Europe drives up prices around the world. But it doesn't work like that. Government handouts are your money, and if you really wanted to rob the rich to feed the poor, not lining the pockets of the food industry and getting more money off the man rather than tanking our shared economy surely has to be part of the plan. Now, somebody who got this was Margaret Thatcher, who pointed out there is no such thing as public money. There is only taxpayers' money, and that it's our duty to look after ourselves. Well, one thing she wouldn't get is the hullabaloo over some eggs being thrown at her statue by a moron. This is the woman who survived an IRA bomb attack and ruled with conviction. Thatch would have no truck for government by focus group, nor the group of ninnies having a hissy fit over some giant toddler using playground tactics to protest her memory. If she did, she'd hardly have been the Iron Lady. But one statue-related incident that is harrowing is clear in images coming from Manchester, showing balaclava-clad militants blocking the statue of Emmeline Pankhurst, the suffragette who gave the vote and a voice to millions of women. The burly men, dressed like terrorists, were there to intimidate women, questioning the demands of men who simply say they're women to get into girls-only safe spaces. If something is so stridently emblematic of how women-hating, misogynistic, extreme and downright dangerous this movement has become, risking the security and the rights of half the population, it's that. And on the subject of risk, apparently, exam invigilators are refusing to oversee GCSE and A-levels because, boo-hoo, COVID. If you want to refuse to do your day job because it involves going somewhere so dangerous as there are other people there, fine. But no pub for you. And finally, if you happen to be called Tarquin, St. John or Sequin or something, then you, dear boy, are the most persecuted in this country as a white public schoolboy. That's according to a Cambridge Don who said that Etonites and Harrovians and their cronies who don't make the grade at Oxbridge are being condemned to dreadful ghetto universities like Durham and Bristol, instead of being recycled into newfangled, wokely named Oxbridge colleges 25 miles out of town. Lord above, how traumatic for these poor souls. According to the professor at a Cambridge college called something like Gonorrhea and Chaos, you never know, you might end up at a world-leading institution like Durham, just as Tom Harwood and I did, and wind up working for GB News. Lord have mercy. Well, let's give the final word to my guest, Charlie Peters. Anything from that smorgasbord of venting that you want to get your teeth into?
I'll start with the top, specifically golf. I'm from Surrey, the county which I think is 7% golf courses. I in fact live on a golf course, well, my family does at least, and it's dreadful. It produces the worst people in the world, I think. I want to walk home sometimes, and I go across the green, and some poor sod is having a shot. I have to wait 10 minutes while he puts the tee down and wakes ages. It's a violation, really. And we need some more homes, don't we? So my only interest in golf is perhaps to pave over them these awful courses and build gorgeous Victorian mansion blocks instead.
Have you ever tried it?
No, I refuse to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was my first attempt yesterday, and it felt like a form of torture, to be honest.
I'll stick to mini golf, thanks. That's all right. Yeah.
Anything else in there?
Yeah, smash Antifa, the people standing outside Emmeline Pankhurst statue, being aggressive and evil and attacking the rights of women. I think far too often the government is very aggressive about far-right activists legitimately, but then go a little bit soft when it comes to the far left. These people are evil, and they often have troubled and evil backgrounds, and it's about time that the police and all the other relevant authorities, had a little knock on the door.
Now, with GCSE and A-levels taking place at the moment, there's a lot of discussion, again, about the attainment gap between the haves and the have-nots, with, in one breath, the Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi, writing in The Times that it's not fair to try and drag down those from public schools and positively discriminate against them. Yep. And then, on the other hand, appearing on the radio today saying, well, there is a problem here and more must be done to help the poorest in society. So where do you stand on this tug-of-war between public schools and state schools?
I was educated at public school. I went to a lovely school called Winchester. I lived there for 5 years, which is brilliant. But I think, generally speaking, it wasn't worth what my parents paid. So I'm very ungrateful, and I hope they're not watching. But I think, generally speaking, at least half, I think, of educational attainment is immutable. It's an intelligence characteristic you inherit from your parents and those before them, and that can't really be changed. Robert Plomin at KCL, the professor there, found that, generally speaking, private school adds about half a grade in quality. So much of that is, I think, classroom quality. You haven't got people throwing chairs around or disrupting the lessons. Generally speaking, I think private school is a waste of time. if you are smart enough to get into these schools at 11 or 13, you are intelligent enough to do well. And instead of your parents chucking, God knows, like even 50 grand a year for some of these boarding schools, take them to the theatre every now and again. Give them sports at home or tutor them if you think that's necessary. But I think we're misunderstanding the cause of that gap. I don't really think it's actually due to the quality of the schooling, but rather actually the quality of the pupil. I mean, it might sound in many ways quite defeatist, but I don't think it is. We just have to understand the backgrounds that some of the people that come from when they go to privately educated institutions.
I mean, would the answer therefore be potentially bringing back grammar schools? I was a grammar school girl, and I always say thank heavens I was. Very few of them left in the country now, and I think it paved my way into a top university. And when I got to Durham, I realised everyone else had a butler, which was news to a lorry driver's daughter.
No, I'm firmly in favour of grammar schools for exactly the reasons you point out. I think those who are smart at 11 or 13 and want to get ahead, they absolutely should be given the opportunity to study with like-minded people. I think that is the real benefit that private school offers, that nobody in your classroom doesn't want to be there. Everyone is interested in education. They want to learn. They want to get ahead. Grammar schools offer the same thing, but without the 50 grand premium.
And the egging of the Margaret Thatcher statue. Everyone's been getting their knickers in a twist about this, but I don't think she'd care. If she was alive today, she'd just roll her eyes, wouldn't she?
Yes, I don't think she'd really particularly bother about having a statue either way. I mean, I think we always have quite nervous discussions about statues these days. God knows next time I'm on your show, someone will be calling for that to be dragged down and destroyed, not just egged. But no, as you're right, I mean, I think Margaret Thatcher couldn't care less about who throws what at a statue. And generally speaking, people should not deface public memorials, especially to national leaders, and I think we shouldn't really pay much attention to these frauds.
Charlie, it's been lovely having you on the show today. Brilliant insights, as always.
Likewise.
Do come back.
Thank you very much.
That's about all I've got time for today, but you can join me again, of course, tomorrow for We Need to Talk About on GB News. Same time, same place, 2 o'clock. Coming up next, it's The Briefing with Darren McCaffrey. First, though, it's time for a check on the weather forecast, and I think things might be looking up. Fingers crossed, eh? See you tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. Plenty going on this week. Some very warm sunshine at times, but also the likelihood of further thunderstorms. We've had some overnights. We've got some more again this afternoon. Low pressure is dominating out to the west, drawing up the warm and at times quite humid air. And we are seeing some thunderstorms along this weather front, pushing their way steadily northwards. Met Office yellow warning in place. Torrential rain is possible, parts of northern England, Northern Ireland especially, before they tend to fizzle out through the evening. Rain may persist across the far north of Scotland, but for most it turns into a dry night, clear spells, a little bit misty in places, and temperatures mostly holding up in double figures. On to Tuesday, and for some a very warm day. A fine, bright day for much of the Midlands, northern and eastern England, a good part of Scotland as well. But the east coast of Scotland could stay a little misty and murky. And further west, we have cloud increasing, some rain at times for Northern Ireland, pushing into